couple of weeks ago, my husband and I started reading Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas. And this is the surprising, also not so surprising, connection between the way we parent and our success in the stock market later in life. Hi, I'm Jenny Taylor, a journalist and conscious parenting advocate. And this is news to help us grow as parents and people. If this content is helpful to you, please subscribe to the channel, share it, and leave a comment so we can let this message spread as far as it can go. Okay, so first a little bit about the book. Now, if you find yourself being interested in learning day trading or swing trading, not to be confused with just long-term, much lower risk index fund trading, then you are going to find this book. It's like a cult classic in the world of day and swing trading. Now, it's important to note that only about 5% or less of people who day trade or swing trade in the stock market are successful. It's a really low percentage. And in this book, the author, Mark Douglas, attributes that incredibly high failure rate to mindset. Now, where are our mindsets first created? In childhood, of course. I'm going to read a little bit from the book. He starts off by talking about this potential for conflict that really exists within ourselves and how this can really get in the way of our trading. But then he talks about the root of how this inner conflict starts in a human, and he attributes it back to the way we are parented. So he says, by the time we are 18 years old, we've been on Earth approximately 6,570 days. Now, on average, how many times per day does the typical child hear things like, no, you can't do that. Don't touch that. You have to do it because I told you to do it. These are just a few of the relatively nice ways in which all of us are denied individual expression as we grow. So even if we only heard such statements once or twice a day, this still adds up to several thousand denials by the time we reach adulthood. Douglas refers to these denials as denied impulses to learn, which I think is such a beautiful way to think about every time our child is reaching for the glass before their hand is swatted away and we say, no, that can break. Whatever we do to step in, we're just denying this impulse that a child has to learn. It's working from this deep place within them, this deep desire to be autonomous, to be curious, to understand how the world works and to try and to fail. But yet they are denied these impulses to learn so frequently. So then I think it's really interesting what he goes on to say. So he poses the question, so what happens to all of these impulses that have been denied and left unfulfilled? Do they just go away? I think that if you have been, in the conscious parenting world for a while and you've been working on yourself and reparenting and doing all of that, really difficult but rewarding work, the answer to that question is that they don't go away. Needs don't go away. They can be masked, but they're going to resurface in other places. Now, what he says, though, is he says they can if they are reconciled in some way. If we do something or someone else does something to put our mental environment back into balance, that's a really beautiful way to look at it, our mental environment back into balance. There are a number of techniques. The most natural one, especially for a child, is simply to cry. Crying is a natural mechanism, nature's way for reconciling these denied, unfulfilled impulses. And if allowed to take its natural course, crying will expel the negatively charged energy in our minds and help bring us back to a state of balance. And you can guess what comes next after this line in the book. Then he proposes the question, but does this happen? No. Usually in that same paradigm of parenting, which is, denying the children's impulses to learn, controlling their every move, telling them to be blindly obedient. Also, along with that parenting style happens to be very little emotional support. So children are often told, big boys don't cry or big girls don't cry. A child might be sent to their room to be alone with their emotions, or they might be hit for them. And then they become double punished because not only is that first denied impulse to learn not recognized as something valuable and shut down, then they're punished again because the emotion that follows, as Douglas says, to put the mental environment back into balance is also denied. So for the majority of many of our lives from our childhoods, we were walking around with these inner needs that were never being met, and they were also never being able to be repaired or reconciled. The next question he addresses in the book is, What happens if these impulses are not reconciled? They accumulate and usually end up manifesting themselves in any number of addictive and compulsive behavior patterns. Over the last few decades, there have been really incredible advancements in the work and field of trauma, where people have dedicated a huge amount of their research just focusing on how our childhood experiences manifest later as addictions and behavioral patterns. Dr. Gabor Mate is one of these physicians and researchers. He frequently talks about the connections between our childhoods and addictions later in life. So check out his work if you want to hear more about what that field has to say.
If you want to understand addiction, you can't look at what's wrong with the addiction. You have to look at what's right about it. In other words, what is the person getting from the addiction? What are they getting that otherwise they don't have? And what addicts get are relief from pain. What they get is a sense of peace, a sense of control, a sense of calmness, very, very temporarily. And the question is, why are these qualities missing from their lives? What happened to them?
The kind of parenting that Douglas is referring to in his book is called authoritarian parenting. Developmental psychologist Diana Baumrind in the 1960s, she categorized parenting into 4 different styles based on observations that she had made. And one of those categories is authoritarian parenting, a style of parenting where parents have very high expectations of their child, but very low support. And this looks like what we just kind of described. So the parent, they expect blind obedience, have extremely strict rules, but without flexibility of collaboration with the child or hearing the child's point of view. They just want blind obedience. You'll find a lot of behaviorism in this style of parenting. So trying to control the child's behavior and emotion through the use of rewards and punishments. But then also there is very low responsiveness and support given to the emotions that come up. So, not a lot of empathy or support, if any, for tears or crying, no tolerance of anger or meltdowns or anything like that. Now, within those other 4 parenting styles, there's authoritarian, which I just described. There is neglectful parenting, there's passive parenting, and then there is authoritative parenting. Now, after decades of research, the parenting style that has the best outcomes for the child and for the parent, I would say, because it feels good to have that deep connection with your child, is authoritative parenting. They're similar in name, but the difference is in authoritative parenting, you still have high expectations for the child, but you also give high emotional support. All emotions are welcome here, and the boundaries are still in place. So for example, I have high expectations for my child not to hurt other people or herself or her environment. I place boundaries all the time within our relationship, and I also come in with high support to support those emotionally. So if there are big tears that come with the boundary, I'm there to be able to comfort her through those tears and come next to her and give her that emotional support. Or if there's a boundary that she feels is unreasonable, I'll listen to her because we have a collaborative relationship. It doesn't mean the boundary is going to change, but I will genuinely hear her and listen to her and give her space to be able to say why she feels something might not be a good fit for her life. The main objective of this author is to be able to get you past all of these blocks, your perpetual need to people please instead of listening to yourself, any kind of impulsive behaviors that you might have, or frantic or anxiety-driven behaviors that you have from your childhood that can get in the way of you successfully trading. But it's not just our child's financial future that this can help also. Sometimes we've all heard stories too about the child who has grown up to be a doctor or a lawyer because that's what their parent wanted them to do, but really they wanted to be something else. This is about our children being autonomous, listening to that voice inside of themselves, following their own inner guidance and inner need to learn and to explore and to make mistakes and not be controlled like a puppet on a string from praise and punishment. And it's also not the only book that this is going to come up in. As adults, every book that we are going to read about self-improvement, it's most likely going to touch on what mindset was developed in our childhood. Where are these limiting beliefs coming from? Another amazing book is The Artist's Way. And there's a story in this about a trader who didn't want to be a trader, but he did it because his father put him there. It says, I'm thinking here of Edwin, a miserable millionaire trader whose joy in life comes from his art collection. Strongly gifted in the visual arts, he was urged as a child to go into finance. His father bought him a seat on the stock exchange for his 21st birthday. He has been a trader ever since. Now in his mid-30s, he is very rich and very poor. Money cannot buy him creative fulfillment. So he surrounds himself with artists and artifacts. So really, this is not about, parenting in a different way so our children can become multimillionaires, although I do hope that for everybody. I feel like we can still have that financial savviness in our life and learn how to trade long-term in the stock market. I do think that everybody should take advantage of compound interest because it's life-changing. And just for a quick side note, if you put $50 a month away in an index fund from the moment your child is born until they're 60, by the time they're 60, they're going to have. Learn about long-term investing. I think it's an important skill to pass on to children, but even more so, let's stop raising generations of people who have to grow up and search TED Talks just to be given permission to cry. It's a whole profession now of tear teachers. Here's one specifically who travels around Japan teaching people how to cry.
When I was at school, I was teased and was very lonely. This made me explore other people's emotions. That's why I do these seminars, so people can show their feelings. How do you make people cry who think it's a weakness? Crying reduces stress. Hiroki Tarai has turned it into a business idea, the Tear Seminar.
I know that it's not easy. I was raised with screaming and yelling and abuse in my childhood, and as a parent now, trying my very best to parent consciously, I feel myself getting triggered, by big meltdowns and emotions. If I'm not well rested or if I am not having my needs met, I still get triggered too. But it is work worth doing. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but if we continue to commit ourselves to do the work of growing, to researching conscious parenting, to be able to apply those dynamics within our relationship, then our children and our world will be so much better for it. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Were you raised in an authoritarian household? How are you parenting your children now?